Cash flow management, the lifeblood of your business. Welcome to IO Insolvency Options with Darren Vardy, the Managing Director of Insolvency Options and a registered liquidator with over 30 years of experience helping businesses and individuals navigate financial challenges. In today's episode, Darren explores why cash flow management is absolutely critical for business survival and reveals the warning signs that indicate trouble ahead. We'll discuss practical strategies for improving your cash flow, managing creditor relationships, and implementing systems that prevent financial crises. You'll master essential cash flow forecasting techniques, understand working capital optimization, and learn when to seek professional help before problems become critical. I'm your co-host Anthony Pearl. Let's dive into unlocking more about insolvency options. Darren, let's talk a little bit about cash flow and the importance of it and how critical it is to a business. People talk about this term all the time, but do they really understand it? And a lot of circles that I've moved, cash flow equals what's in the bank account. And that's not necessarily the same thing, is it?
No, it's not. And unfortunately, a lot of small businesses, the owners do treat the business bank account like their personal bank account, which is a big no-no, for want of a better term. You know, the importance of cash flow, again, comes back around to avoiding insolvency. When we test for insolvency, it's a cash flow test. Is there sufficient funds flowing in to enable to pay the creditors on the out? And cash flow is not profit neither. You know, a lot of people will look at profit and say, well, I'm profitable. Why am I profitable? But I don't seem to have enough cash to pay people, you know, week on week, month on month. And the reason for that could be that their cash could be locked up in balance sheet items such as stock or debtors. And to produce cash flow from your income, from your sales, it's a matter of realising the trade debtors within terms and minimising the stock held throughout a period of time. Because stock sitting in a warehouse is, for want of a better term, wasted cash flow, because it's stock that you have to pay your creditors for, which is just sitting there and you've not yet converted it to income. Likewise with your debtors, if your debtors are paying you outside of terms, you may have a 30-day terms. If your debtors are paying you at 60 days, that has a knock-on effect as to the availability of cash to pay your creditors. And quite often what you find is if your debtors are paying you at, say, 30 to 60 days, and you have to pay your creditors at 14 to 30 days, you will need some cash flow or some working capital to enable those creditors to be paid.
And there's nothing worse than having to wait. You know, you want people to pay you straight away. And the truth is that doesn't happen. And often the bigger the business that you're dealing with, the longer the time to actually receive those payments, and the delay, and it just has a steamroll effect.
Yeah. And really it's a matter of being on top of your customers. You know, when we talk about debtors, it's about the relationship with your clients. And there are some industries where, particularly the construction industry, the nature in which claims are made and then paid, you know that you are at the 60-day mark. So then you need to forecast and budget. How do I build the working capital, or what working capital do I need to be able to keep my creditors happy and pay them maybe a little bit earlier than that before I actually get paid? Because your creditors are the people that will be continuing to build the project month in, month out. So working capital and your working capital requirement and having additional funds available will assist in that cash flow, with that cash flow hole. They're speaking to a business that sells products. You know, you might find yourself where there are just some debtors that are just regular late payers. And you've got to look at the cost to your business of that. And the cost to your business is the alternative finance that you need to get to put in to top up the cash flow as a result of them paying, let's say, at 90-day terms. And there's an old 80-20 rule. There's normally the top 80% of your customers will take up 20% of your time, whereas the bottom 20% of your customers will take up 80% of your time. And why are they taking up 80% of your time? And generally it's because they're the late payers. They're the ones that you got to continually follow up. They're the ones that make you not sleep at night because they're not paying in accordance with their terms. And quite often I have to say to clients, what you need to do is continually look at that bottom 20% of your customers that are taking up that 80% of your time and look at revolving them out and looking at removing them from your business. Because you remove those customers from your business, whilst your income might fall marginally in the short term, it frees you up time to gain new customers. So we've always got to be looking at our customers and at our debtors ledger and really, really focusing on circulating those debtors who are not paying within terms or are perpetually late and costing your business money.
There's an old adage that I swear by as well. The less they pay, the more they demand.
Correct. Again, the 80-20 rule.
It's so true, isn't it? I think there's plenty of businesses that are sitting out there just right now and going, "Yep, that's exactly it." And it's hard. I remember talking a few years ago to someone who was running quite a sizable business, and at this particular point, the business was web building and technology and that sort of space. And I remember him telling me, saying, "I spent this week having uncomfortable meetings with people because I was sacking clients." Where, I literally had to sit them down and say, "I love you, but this isn't worth it anymore. You need to go over here. I'll recommend you someone else, but it's time we part ways." It's not an easy thing to do because, sometimes you have these legacy clients for lots of reasons. Sometimes you're passionate about them. It's hard to make those kinds of decisions, but you're absolutely right that you've got to look at how much time are they taking up and for what amount of return. And how much value could you get by bringing on, the value of new clients and looking at that? It's an uncomfortable territory.
And it certainly is, particularly where the emotional connection comes in. Some of these clients may have supported the business when it first came out and operational, and people through the evolution of time move beyond that business relationship to a personal relationship. And so you get back to the difficult conversations because of the emotional connection. But when at the detriment of your business, the business relationship you have with these customers has a detriment to your business. If you can't put your hand up and have a conversation with that debtor in the first instance, or in the second instance, when you have that conversation, that debtor is offended by the fact that you're raising this particular issue with them, well, then you've got to ask yourself, are they really a valuable customer to us if they can't have that conversation with you? So for me, I then say, well, that's really you've just answered the question as to why we're having the conversation. And the reason why I shouldn't be dealing with you, because there may come a time in the future where the debt gets quite significant and then they end up in an adverse financial position and that debt becomes a bad debt, which then has a flow-on effect to your business.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that, being in the space that you're in, sitting down with businesses who, to try and resolve cash flow issues for them and telling them, here's 5 businesses that you've got to sack. It's hard when it gets to that point.
Yes. Yeah. And that's where it quite often an advisor is good to come in to help you work through those issues and if need be implement, say, to help you protect your business.
Yeah, I mean, is that something you get involved with? Is actually doing that? Can you be the one that has those uncomfortable conversations on behalf of the business?
Have done in the past. And, what we bring to the table is unemotive, pure numbers and with a bit of empathy towards the position. And quite often you do get some good outcomes. But if the outcome on the other side is that, or as I indicated, if the response on the other side is that of the fact that the conversation is offensive, well, then you know that this isn't the right fit customer for the business. And it's better to call it a day sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And look, and I think, I imagine in most cases that idea of recommending them to someone else, introducing them to someone else who might be more fitting and be willing to work with them. Because I think often the case is when you find yourself being a small fish in a very big pond, to move over to someone who's going to treat you as a big fish in their pond is a positive.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
So talk to me a little bit about, the whole idea of saying, okay, the modeling and the tools that you need to put in place to manage your cash flow. What are the important take homes for people to start thinking about?
Yeah, look, there are plenty of tools out there, from cash flow specific tools to programs to the like. But, with the majority of small businesses, it's probably more easier to run a simple cash flow model on an Excel spreadsheet. And quite often it's as simple as identifying and working out what your monthly expenses are that is a constant, month in, month out. Because it's those monthly expenses that need to be covered. And that's the income required to cover those monthly expenses is where you get to what's called your break-even analysis. Helps you identify how much income you need on a monthly basis to ensure that you are cash flow positive or at least breaking even.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to get that overall perspective, isn't it? I mean, how often do you find that businesses just don't have a grasp on those basics? Because I think we often forget that the people that start the business may not be financial people. They've gone into the business. They could be creative. They could be technical. They've got an area of expertise that they're great in, but it doesn't automatically assume that they know everything about finance and those what might seem simple in terms of cash flow management can be incredibly arduous and difficult for someone who just doesn't get it.
So I think it's fair to say that with small business, any business owners that are treating their company's bank account as if it's their own personal bank account fall into that category. They lack the understanding of what cash flow is required to operate their business. Because if they were on top of their cash flow, they would be paying themselves a reasonable wage for which they would be living from on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis, which would then go into their calculations as to the cash inflow needed each week or month to cover the cash outflow that is expected.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important, isn't it? That simple act of taking out a certain amount on whether it's weekly, fortnightly, or monthly basis to pay yourself a wage, just the act of that happening automatically is a huge differentiator in the way you view what's in an account.
Correct. And, again, we get back to the old adage, if there isn't sufficient cash coming in to pay your wage, why are we here?
Yeah, and it is such an important question. And I think it's, a lot of people mask it by being, oh, well, I'm in startup phase. How long is startup phase for? And at what point are you continuing to throw money into a sinking ship? And that's where this is, important.
Yeah. And it's interesting, you talk about startup phase. There's cash flow modeling and then there's forecasting. To do a forecast for 12 months, 2 years, 3 years is also important because that's what you're aspiring to achieve. And it might be that for the first 12 months you are in startup phase or 6 months, but there is a certain point in time where you want to get to a position where you're at a break-even level, if not surplus, where all of your expenditure is being covered. And that expenditure includes reasonable remuneration of its directors for the work that they put into the business at any given period of time. Now, obviously at startup phase, directors put an enormous amount of hours in, set up doing, managing, so on and so forth. But at a point in time, as the business grow and staff comes on, the business will get to a level where it is self-promoting and growing, where the directors can sit back and say, okay, for the amount of time and effort I'm putting in, am I being properly remunerated or appropriately remunerated for my efforts? And if not, why not? And what does that need to be? And as a result of that, what does the income need to be? And can I actually get there? And what do I need to do to get there? And then create the plan to get there. And this is where the forecasting is important, because you have your forecasting, because you don't want to be going on year on year on year, not putting in time and hours and effort and not being properly and appropriately remunerated for it.
Just to wrap up this conversation, I'm intrigued from your perspective. How often is cash flow one of the biggest reasons that people come to you, or in fact, that they come to you or they find themselves at your doorstep and you discover that this is the biggest problem?
Well, it's because of lack of cash flow that people have debt. So cash flow is the real reason behind the existence of the debt at the time that they come and see me. And the lack of cash flow is the reason why they can't see light at the end of the tunnel in being able to repay that debt over a reasonably short period of time into the future. And it may well be that there is a possibility to have a working capital injection, and it may well be that the family home is refinanced to put some funds in to pay some debt. But then the concern is, does that stop the trading losses? You know, whilst it sorts out the historical debt, all you're doing is replacing one debt for another debt. So then you've got to look at it and say, well, okay, why are we here and what do we need to address to make sure that we trade forward profitably and make it worthwhile putting the money in, as opposed to calling it a day at that point in time.
Yeah, and of course, you've also got the problem that if you're going backwards, can you actually get the loan in the first place? That's also an issue.
Correct.
Well, that's it for this episode of the IO Insolvency Options podcast. I hope you've got plenty of valuable knowledge and practical steps for whatever your situation is from Darren today. And if you need guidance on insolvency matters, contact Darren Vardy directly at insolvencyoptions.com.au or call 1800 463 328. Or of course, you can connect with Darren on LinkedIn. Details in the show notes below. With over 30 years of experience, Darren and his team provide personalized solutions for both personal and corporate insolvency challenges. This episode was produced by my team at podcastdoneforyou.online, helping professionals share their expertise through powerful podcast content. If you found value in today's episode, please like, comment, and subscribe to the IO Insolvency Options podcast wherever you are listening to this. Your engagement helps us reach more business owners who need these crucial insights. Until next time, remember, there's always a way forward when you know your options.